Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 120, Meno 88d to 89a. Socrates has now made the argument that anything good is beneficial, but it is only beneficial if it is accompanied by phronesis, and it is actually harmful when it is not accompanied by phronesis, or rather is accompanied by aphrosyne, the opposite. We can call phronesis and aphrosyne prudence and imprudence. Even virtues behave like this. They are beneficial when phronesis accompanies them, but they are harmful when aphrosyne accompanies them. In other words, virtue can be harmful. Obviously, Socrates would like Meno to object, to begin to think critically, but Meno doesn't. He's quite happy with the way Meno is not doing any of the work. Meno likes to listen to Socrates doing all the work. Socrates has no choice but to continue with this ludicrous argument. Kai mende kai talla hanunde elegomen pluton te kai ta toyauta totemen agatha totede blabera enai. And the other things as well, which we were talking about just now, wealth and things such as that. We said they were sometimes good and sometimes harmful. It's a small point, but we should note that Socrates has dropped a stage here. The good things were agreed to be beneficial, but now the good things themselves are treated as the opposite of harmful, which in a way is logical with Meno, because for him all good things are either beneficial or harmful. Just to be clear about the correct way of looking at all of this, in terms of this argument, anything doesn't have to be good or bad. Anything can be beneficial or harmful depending on whether phronesis accompanies or aphrosyne accompanies. Things in themselves are neither good nor bad, neither beneficial nor harmful. We haven't yet been told what the magic property is of phronesis or aphrosyne, which somehow makes other things either beneficial or harmful. If we pressed the argument too much, we would find that there can be good and bad things without phronesis or aphrosyne, but they would have to be good things which are not automatically beneficial and bad things which are not automatically harmful. And those things, therefore, would be what is good in itself. For example, a painting or a statue. But all this is beyond the scope of the present argument. Socrates continues his sentence. Ara uch hosperte alle psuche he phronesis hegumene ophelimatates psyches epoie hede aphrosyne blabera, hutos au kai tutois he psuche orthos men chromene kai hegumene ophelimauta poie me orthos de blabera. Panuge. So isn't it the case that just as for the rest of the soul, when phronesis was ruling, it made the things of the soul beneficial, but when aphrosyne was ruling, that made the things of the soul harmful. So, just in the same way, moreover, isn't it the case that also for these things, the soul, when it is using these things rightly and controlling or guiding, it makes these things beneficial. And when it doesn't use these things correctly or rightly, it makes these things harmful. Absolutely. The Greek was very condensed, and I had to elaborate to make it intelligible in English. But the idea is that just as phronesis makes virtues beneficial, the things about the soul, it also makes these external goods, like health, wealth, strength, beneficial when the soul uses these things rightly or correctly. So phronesis and aphrosune act on the virtues themselves, the things of the soul, but then the soul acts on external goods, and if the soul uses them correctly, they are beneficial, and if the soul uses them incorrectly, they are harmful. When it comes to the soul doesn't change into a not soul or anything like that. The opposition is in how the soul uses things. And we're back to the original problem with virtue. Meno had listed virtues as tasks appropriate to age, gender, status, and it was Socrates who pushed for another sort of virtue. He added all the time, what about saying with justice, with sophrosune? He was the one who emphasized how things are done and not what was being done. There are still pitfalls we should avoid. For example, the idea that the virtues themselves may be harmful when they are guided by aphrosune, imprudence. We should also notice that Socrates has slipped in the notion that the soul uses things rightly as a parallel to phronesis guiding the things of the soul, the virtues. It's as if he is saying that phronesis is like using things correctly. Socrates now combines the parallels. Orthos deg he emphron he getai, he marte menost he aphron, estit auta. The prudent soul guides correctly, and the imprudent soul guides mistakenly. This is the case. Literally, these things are. Socrates doesn't actually mention the word soul, psyche, but he describes the prudent as feminine, he emphron, and the imprudent again as feminine, he aphron, and the nearest feminine thing here is soul, psyche. The words for prudent and imprudent here are new. We have had phronesis, prudence, the noun, in the soul, but now it's the soul itself which is prudent. Also, until now, we have had aphrosune in the soul, but now the soul itself is described as aphron, lacking phren, lacking a lung, or lacking the place where there is intelligence, in other words, unintelligent. This is the best formulation we have had so far, that it is the prudent soul which guides correctly, and the imprudent soul which guides incorrectly. So now, of course, Socrates begins to ruin it. We have to remember that Plato is not writing a philosophical treatise. This is Socrates trying to train Meno to think critically. And the first thing he has to do is to get Meno to say, wait a minute, this is wrong. Something which never happens. Uk un huto de kata pantone penestin, to anthropo tamen alla panta esten psychen anirtestai, tadetes psyches autes es phronesin, e mele agathaenai. Therefore, it is possible to say thus about all things, that for a human, all other things are fitted to the soul, but the things of the soul itself are fitted to phronesis if they are going to be good. This is actually a step backwards. Instead of a prudent soul using everything correctly, we have external things dependent on this soul, and the things of the soul, in other words the virtues, are dependent on phronesis, but it isn't explained why. In other words, here we don't see that phronesis is something to do with using things correctly. And all of this is so that those things may be good, not beneficial. Now it gets even worse. Kai tuto to logo phronesis an to ophelimon. And by this argument, phronesis would be the beneficial. Philosophically, this is utter nonsense. The beneficial is the abstraction of all beneficial things. Something is beneficial if it participates in the beneficial. If the beneficial isn't in that thing, it isn't beneficial. However, Meno thinks concretely, and for him, he's hearing that phronesis is the thing which is beneficial. Even this is nonsense, because it has been argued during this argument that it is phronesis which makes other things beneficial. Meno really should have reacted, and I'm sure Socrates is supposed to be very disappointed here. I mean Socrates of the drama, not the historical Socrates. This is not a dialogue with the historical Socrates in it. It's time for Socrates to bring this part of the argument to a close. Phrones in ara phamen aretenenai etoi sumpasan e merosti. Dokemoi kalos leges thou Socrates talegomena. So we claim that phronesis is arete, either all of it or a part. It seems to me, Socrates, that the things being said are being said beautifully or finely or well. It's quite possible that Meno has heard from other people that phronesis is arete itself, virtue itself. It certainly hasn't followed from this argument where we had lots of virtues and phronesis was added to the virtues to make them beneficial. It would make sense for Meno to agree that phronesis is one or a part of virtue because it guides other virtues. And if there are other virtues, phronesis can't be the whole virtue. We, the readers, are not Meno, and we should try to use our minds correctly.